This is Uncommonly Remarkable, where we discuss the surprising everyday lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. My name is Artis Beatty. I am a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and the conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Today's guest is the owner and chief medical officer of PrimeMD Aesthetics and Wellness. He describes himself as purposeful and hardworking, but I would say he's also gracious, kind, and dedicated to helping others achieve their potential. As a former collegiate athlete, husband, and father, he recognizes the importance of functioning at peak performance and of achieving one's highest level of vitality. Dr. Joe Hummel is a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Medicine and completed his residency at the Mayo Clinic. He is board certified with a clinical focus on anti-aging medicine and medical informatics. In this episode, learn how Dr. Joe transitioned from years of emergency medicine to starting PrimeMD in 2010 and making it his primary focus in 2017. Learn about how elements of his childhood, his wrestling career, his medical school experiences, and his residency training led him to think differently about his medical career and why his more holistic approach to each patient or client may lead to a better outcome and increased functional longevity. Listen to how he not only practices medicine, but truly practices servant leadership, and how that has led to some interesting projects, including a farm. I can't wait to get into this episode. So now, ladies, gentlemen, and all you remarkable people, please welcome Dr. Joe Hummel to the show. Dr. Joe, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is so exciting to have you here on the show.
Artis, I'm delighted to be here with you.
Man, thank you so much for taking time to come and sit and talk with me. This has been a long time coming, and I'm very excited to actually have you here.
Well, I broke a cardinal rule. I pledged myself to never be on a podcast. And your charisma is so good, and you're such a gentleman, and there's something wonderfully unique about you. I broke one of my own rules, so I broke one of my own moral codes to be here today.
Well, I had no idea. You didn't even tell me it was a rule. Wow.
So I find when someone tries to commercialize or authenticate authenticity, it sometimes like ruins it sort of thing. And so I never want to be seen as like a light of someone that's trying to commercialize or like be authentic in an inauthentic way.
I see. Well, I appreciate you making the effort, breaking the rule, coming and join me. You know, what I love about being able to do this with people is that for me, it's all about the conversation, and we get to talk about all the stuff. And if there's stuff that is beneficial to other folks while we have the conversation, that is phenomenal, right? But I don't look at it as a platform to push an idea or promote a product. It's much more about, can people get any knowledge out of some of the things that we've done, kind of going through life and setting up businesses or careers or hobbies or having fun, that gives them something to look forward to or to think differently about.
Amen. I love that.
We have talked on the show before about health and wellness, and I'm pretty excited to have you here because I do think you've got a wonderful take on how to optimize health and wellness over time, over maybe a time span. And so your practice is PrimeMD Aesthetics and Wellness, and it is in the Raleigh, North Carolina area.
Correct.
How long have you been in the practice?
So I started PrimeMD in 2010. I would idea born by 2005 and developed over time, and it's part of the development of something new and different. In 2010, I decided to kind of take that to my first couple clients. We've grown word of mouth. We don't do any advertising. Just really trying to grow something authentic to really connect with folks. When I approach medicine, I always wanted to leave an imprint on some folks. My idea was by the end of my career, I wanted to have 100 individuals that I helped to change the trajectory of their lives, where I was a very positive moniker, coach, teacher, in some way that I changed health outcomes. And that was kind of where PrimeMD was born, what we've kind of grown out of it.
Wow. And so how do you measure that trajectory or that change trajectory in someone's life?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what drew me to medicine. So I had an uncle who was a family practice doctor in Florida, successful really just by how his patients cared about him, how he cared about his patients. I remember in the late 1980s, shadowing him as a high school student and going in and hearing him relate with his patients. And he knew his patients' kids. He knew what sports they were into, what hobbies they had. He knew the dynamics of the family, what was going on. And I remember at the same time, his documentation, right? A child comes in with earache. He had this talk and he asked how things were going. He knew about the football team he was on and that the parents were having some rough times. And then at the end of the visit, his note was ROMABX, right? So right otitis media, ear infection,
Okay.
and he gave antibiotics. And then I also shadowed in kind of a big time clinic up in New Jersey where I was from. And I was told that, documentation makes medicine. So what makes great doctors is great documentation. So these very long stories of here's what they came in and here's what they're here for, and asking all these questions, right? Headaches and vision changes and earaches and sore throat and runny noses and coughs. And these very full notes is how you document yourself to good physicianship and also to higher income. And I'm, again, looking at this juxtaposition of here's my uncle that's a very successful in the sense of a physician way, maybe not as financially successful as a lot of doctors, but like had what I thought was a great relationship and was changing outcomes versus this very influential clinic
Mm-hmm.
that was entirely based off of like how much documentation you collect. So like right away in my young mind, I'm like, why am I being told one thing and then being told something different? And then I'm trying to put like my own value spin on it. I'm like, I like option A better, right? Like having a different interaction with clients.
It's an interesting thing to think about because I think if any of the listeners are in the medical field, you talk about, you live and you breathe documentation, right? Like you've got to get it in there. If you didn't write it, it didn't happen. We got to make sure that we have all the but you can get really lost in documenting an encounter if you're not actually paying attention and interacting with the patient. And in the end, the patient's not going to remember how well you wrote things down. They very rarely even see that stuff.
Right.
And if they do, it's because they're moving or changing physicians or going someplace. But they will remember that you looked them in the eye, asked them what their problem was, and they were able to explain it to you while you were really, truly listening. Right?
Exactly.
I think it's a big deal to be able to get everything that you need from a charting perspective done, but it's a bigger deal to make sure that the patient actually enjoys the experience.
That's right. I'm sure with your practice, you have to come to those conclusions of how much is enough, but then also want to be something very personal. With you with a gigantic, business model that way, keeping that personal touch is a really big deal.
Right. And so you started thinking about the direction you wanted to go. And so clearly you're focusing on the patient outcomes, but then how did you progress from figuring that part out to actually starting this practice?
That's beautiful. So I went to Chapel Hill undergraduate where I wrestled. Then I went to Chapel Hill for my medical school. I decided to do my residency in family practice. I initially was going to be an orthopedic surgeon, right? So I'm a road to Damascus guy, right? I have these like moments where I get smashed on the head or knocked off my horse or blinded. And I get up, I do the same thing until I'm struck down again, right? But I remember that I was approaching my medical school time and I was like, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. I love the idea of, can I fix something like that, very tactile? Let's have something broken and fix it, care for somebody, and then kind of move them back into the world. I met my wife. She's now 25 years married. We have a 19-year-old daughter, and she's a marriage and family therapist. So I'm coming at the world with this like analytic brain, figuring out like, let's fix something. And she's a therapist. And with my time with her, I'm like, boy, I wonder if like that is really what I want to do is fix people directly if I have more of a relationship attitude. At the same time, I was lucky enough to have an internship opportunity with an orthopedic surgeon at Chapel Hill who was like the dude back in the day. And I'm with this guy and I should be like really enjoying it. I'm like, if I end up being like this gentleman, like I don't think my life's going to be what I want it to be from a happiness standpoint. Like the fulfillment just wasn't there watching this live. And it's one of those moments I think we all had where it's like, oh, if this is my reality, like that's a reality I don't want, but if I put all this time and effort, so it's like, what do we do now, right? How do we bridge the gap? So I'm deciding this, I'm hearing my wife, and this relational aspect of things and how she's approaching her clients. And I'm really kind of digging that. And then I literally, had this moment where I was smashed on the head with a weight bar at the gym. And I basically suffered this really bad head injury. The cable was broke when I was doing a behind the neck pull down.
Oh boy.
And I pulled with 300 pounds of force on my head. And I knocked myself out with my workout partner back in just starting medical school. And I don't remember the next 36 hours. I biked home, apparently slept for 24 hours, kind of came to. And my roommate's like, you better go see the doctor. Well, I did. And turns out I had some little issues with some memory for a while and these bad headaches. And then I really couldn't stand for a long period of time without really bad headaches. My arms are going numb and stuff. And so it's like, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to be an orthopedic surgeon. Maybe I'm supposed to sit and use my brain more. So that was like this first time. It's like, okay, here comes my kind of career change in mentality. So I shifted my focus from orthopedic surgery to family practice.
I mean, a literal bang in the head.
A literal knockdown. I said, I got to get kicked in the head. That's been the story of my life. If something goes well, I have to get kicked or shocked in the head to change my direction. Right? It's an interesting way that happened.
You said a couple of things, and we're gonna get back to this practice progression. But you mentioned that you were a wrestler.
Yes.
Like, you got to talk about that a little bit. So you wrestled at UNC.
Correct.
Were you a wrestler in high school too?
I started wrestling when I was 5 because I was so uncoordinated. Like, I tried to play basketball and they're like, you would be good at wrestling, like literally. So I went to wrestle. And of course, the coach was trying to be nice, right? At the end of my first year of wrestling, I won no matches, but I was never pinned. And at the end, I tried to say something nice about every kid at age 5. And I think my coach, I'm like, oh, well, Joe went out to every match and he never pooped his pants in public. That was kind of like the best thing that they could say about my wrestling career, right? In my stubbornness, I stayed with it. And over time, I got decent at wrestling. And middle school, I did one like the middle school state championship. And then by that point, it was like, all right, my goal was to win the New Jersey high school state championship. And I took that like serious. I was a workaholic. Come from a German background, like work is how you win, right? It's not thinking, it's not performing at high level. It's just, you just bang rocks, baby, right? And so I was taught that from an early age. I can bang rocks. And so all through high school, worked really hard with this singular goal of being the New Jersey high school state wrestling champ. And it's one of the few states that's kind of interesting. A lot of other states have Division 1, 2, 3, 4, so there's 5 or 6 state champions.
Yeah.
In New Jersey, everybody goes in one pool. So the whole state literally has one person at each weight class that's the state champion. So my senior year, I'm actually pretty good and was undefeated. And we have the team state championships the following week, and then the state individuals start the week after.
Okay. And
I'd beaten some pretty good guys that year, was in a match, and it was inconsequential kind of end of the year match. And I was tripping this guy at the end of the match. I was up like 17-0 or something like that. I was 14-0, and I tripped him, and I dislocated my left elbow. So my arm was about a foot shorter. My elbow unhinged at the joint, and it was stuck, locked out. And so the ambulance came. My dad passed out in the stands. They put me in the ambulance and had to kind of like tip me up because my arm was locked straight. So I was riding the ambulance like upside down. I got to the hospital, gave me morphine. I had this huge rash, and like, your arms are a little too big for you to pull it back in. So you have to pull this bar and bite on this kind of cotton wad and just will hold you and just pull as hard as you can and slide. So I feel this bone scrape and my arm went back in. Right? So relocated the arm, put me in a big cast. And then the next week, our team had never had a team state championship. And we were ranked 1 in the state, and I couldn't wrestle. And I was the heavyweight at that point in time.
Okay.
And we lost by like 3 points. And the guy that beat my replacement, I beat him twice that year, right? So the first week after this thing happened, our team didn't win the states because I wasn't able to participate. Likely this guy could have beat my butt, but I beat him twice. I hopefully would have done well. And then the next week at the state championship, the 3 guys who I had beat during the season all took 1, 2, 3 sort of thing. And so here I was like,
oh boy,
worked all this time and then like had this taken out from me. And my plan was, I was going to just finish high school and then like hopefully be a state champion and like be done with wrestling, right? And the lesson from that was like, no matter what happens, like you're going to get kicked really hard in life. Like nothing is fair, not in a mean way or anxious way. It's just like life's not fair. And those moments that happen push us to something else. I ended up not winning wrestling in college. I got to college after I had some scholarships, and I decided I was just going to wrestle in a mural league. And I went out to Chapel Hill and win this intramural tournament. I did pretty good. And the coach said, hey, why don't you come out and try out for the team? Right. And so I'm like, all right, I'll do that. So I never would have done it if I had won the state championship. I'm like, oh no, I had this whole 4 more career at Chapel Hill at a big time school,
Yeah.
getting to wrestle. And again, first 3 years I wrestled behind this guy who was just a beast. He was bigger than me, smarter than me, tougher than me, better looking than me, and a couple-time national champion. And we threw down and scrapped and had some really good times and got really beat up on. That was back in the day when sports were a little, I don't say mean, or we weren't as good as training or as tough as the guys are now, but it was a little more rugged.
Wow.
And at one point we flew through a window, like literally at wrestling practice. There was big plate glass windows, and we wrestled through it. And our coach literally had us keep wrestling like outside with glass on us. It was pretty awesome, like back in like the days where like you could do that sort of thing.
Man, it's like Fight Club.
It was like Fight Club. And then in college, worked myself pretty good. My senior year, I was ranked 10th in the country. My goal was, okay, can I be an All-American? And that means if you finish in the top 8. I knew I wasn't good enough to be in the top 5 or 6, but on a perfect day, maybe if I wrestled really great and got a couple lucky breaks, where I maybe could finish in the top 8 was my goal. And the week before the Nationals at the ACC Championship, I was wrestling, and I bumped heads with this guy and had an impact seizure on the mat. So I had this horrible seizure, like in front of the whole stands. Don't remember the match the day after, like this really bizarre thing, and came to, and of course, like, oh, you can't wrestle at the NCAAs. You would be seeded and ranked. But my senior year, I finally got my chance, and then had a good season, and that sort of happened. So it's like, geez, Louise. But it's like the lesson was, hey, you do what you do, and sometimes you get kicked in the nose, and then it changes things a little bit.
Wow, that is literally again banging the head.
Banging, like I literally took a little knock in the head, right? Yeah.
Wow. So I didn't know all of this about the wrestling piece, and we may have actually overlapped at UNC at some point because I was there between 1994 and 1998-ish.
That's exactly when I did my degree.
Okay. And so I did not go and watch wrestling much. Like I think I went
no one did.
Yeah, but I it was during that time where I was trying to figure. People laugh at me now because I am sports ball deficient. Meaning, if it has to do with sports of any sort, I probably don't know much about it. But when I was at UNC, I made a concerted effort to go to all these sports, and so like I went to swim meets and I went to gymnastics competitions, and I actually had gone to a couple of wrestling matches. And so there's a good chance that the future Dr. Joe was wrestling. I was hanging out trying to figure out like all of this stuff going on and not understanding any of the rules. And it's just funny how life works that way.
Mm-hmm.
So if we fast forward again now, we're going through, we decided that maybe being an orthopedic surgeon is not for you. How did you then kind of point yourself in this direction?
Yeah. So
from there.
And this is like when I look back at like what defines a career, like what got me thinking in a different way, or got me thinking, period, I guess. Because at one point, right, and through the whole education process of college and then graduate school, going for your doctorate, right? It's just bang bang again, just breaking rocks, just learn, and not a lot of time sometimes to think. As silly as that sounds, but it's like I have to ingest, absorb all the time, right? This drinking from a fire hose analogy, but never having the time to kind of sit back and think. I chose to go to a residency at the Mayo Clinic, based out of Rochester, Minnesota, and spent some time during there in Minnesota at the Mayo Clinic itself, and actually some time at this hospital in Des Moines, Iowa. So kind of interesting, when we were up at Mayo Clinic, it was the full Mayo Clinic experience, right? Like Saudi princes flying in, and we would literally greet them at the private airport with our Mayo Clinic jackets with lapel monikers and placards. But how medical school works is, right, you do 2 years of learning, and then you do 2 years of kind of on-the-job training where you spend time with different physicians. Well, then for a residency, so that's after medical school, when you decide what you want your specialty to be, you go in that specialty and then you train around again. And so now I'm this family practice doctor at the Mayo Clinic, and I'm on a primary care rotation with a family doctor. And I see this gentleman, we'll just call him Steve-O, right? Steve-O comes in on a Thursday afternoon, a 52-year-old guy. And I'm listening to the family doctor. So I'm in the room like as the fly on the wall learning, taking notes, right, for this doctor, as a doctor under training under him. And we're talking about cholesterol. And the gentleman's LDL cholesterol at the time, right, that's the low density, which is kind of the bad guy. We know a little bit more now. I don't want to get too in detail. But his LDL cholesterol was 126. And the family doctor that I was working with, again, fully boarded, great guy at the Mayo Clinic, clearly educated, knows what he's doing, said, LDL cholesterol under 130 at the time. That was the guideline. You're looking great. Guys like heart attack risk. What's that? And Steve says, I'm not so sure there. I'm just concerned about that. A little bit of family history, not bad. And family doctor says, hey, you're under 126. So from a cholesterol standpoint, no concerns. Blood pressure is good. So I'm on this family practice rotation. That weekend, I'm on call overnight in the emergency department. Steve-O, this client with the LDL of 126, comes in with an acute heart attack. I'm the first person to see him, right, as this intern/resident. And we triage him very quickly, get him to the cath lab. His heart is blocked. They put a stent in, saved his life, right? Spends, I guess, Friday night, Saturday night in the hospital, goes home Sunday, something like that. I'm off service. I had Sunday off. Monday, I shift to the cardiology practice, right? So I was shadowing as a family doctor the preceding week.
Okay.
This next week, I switched to be a month as a cardiologist intern. And sure enough, Monday morning, in walks Steve-O, this guy that I saw Thursday, healthy, with an LDL of 126, who then Friday night had a heart attack. And now he's having his cardiology follow-up again. Wonderful turnaround, Mayo Clinic turnaround. Like, this guy is in the office Monday morning for his cardiology follow-up. And the cardiologist opens up the chart and says, you had a heart attack and your LDL is 126. Your goal should be less than 70. People don't clog with less than 70. We have to get your LDL less than 70. And here I am, this young student. I'm like, wait a second. Why was it 4 days ago this some gun could have a 126 and everybody's clapping him on the back and feeding him hard-boiled eggs and steak, right? And then on Monday, he's the persona non grata because his LDL is 126 and that's why I had a heart attack, right?
Yeah.
And so again, smashed on the head analogy of like, okay, like what am I seeing here? This great family doctor saw this guy and said 126 was good. And now the cardiologist after heart attack said 70. So we're, like what's the rub here, right?
Yeah.
And so just trying to get that figured out. And then still learning, digesting, getting, beat up on from the medical side, right? Trying to learn and just survive at that point. And then a month later, I go on the endocrinology service, right? And I see, and we'll call it Steve B, right? Not Steve-O, it's Steve B comes in. And Steve B sees this guy on a Wednesday, this endocrinologist, and he's like, yeah, my mood is down a little bit. My energy's down a little bit. My libido's down a little bit. I'm starting to have some erectile issues. Endocrinologist very appropriately checked his testosterone labs. They were stone cold within normal limits. His testosterone was 400, 420, something like that. And the endocrinologist like, well, your labs look pretty good. Your thyroid's good. Your hormones are in the average range. Let's get you an exercise program. And that one was Viagra was new, so there's a lot of buzz, right? That was how long ago it was that Viagra was a very new drug. And we'll see if we get that covered and kind of see how things go. Literally 2 weeks later, I changed service and I went from endocrinology, right, the study of hormones, a hormone doctor, to a urologist, which is a male doctor, right? And at that time, the only doctors writing for hormone therapy in the country were really urologists. And this guy at the Mayo Clinic was one of the upstart guys that, hey, maybe guys who are on the lower level, maybe we treat them a little bit. So now, again, I'm in here with Steve B, who had a 425 testosterone 2 weeks ago. He comes into this doctor's office. He's got a 425 testosterone in Mayo Clinic labs. And Shaw's like, hey, I know what your problem is. Your testosterone's way too low for your age. It should be 800 for a guy in his early 40s. And that's why your energy's low and your focus is off and your mood is off and your recovery is bad and your libido is not maybe where it is, or at least a contributing factor. So here I am sitting there, I'm this dumb, intern thinking like, now wait a second. 2 weeks ago, he was seeing this world-class endocrinologist at the Mayo Clinic, and his 425 was not at all part of the problem. His, testosterone was not at all part of the problem of what was going on. And now he's seeing this urologist who all of a sudden is like, hey, I see this what the problem is. He put this guy on low-dose testosterone. He comes in a couple weeks later, and the guy was, again, energy was better, mood was better, focus better, libido better. And again, is it a panacea? No. Am I saying that, testosterone is the key of all things? Not at all. But in this gentleman, it certainly made a huge impact on the quality of his life. Mm-hmm. But in my little chipmunk brain, I'm trying to figure out, wait a second, why is this number okay here and this number is not okay here? And that's where I started to kind of grapple this concept. Okay, maybe normal isn't optimal. And maybe we have to start doing better of addressing, really where people are at and what we should do that's in their best interest. Like if you don't have heart attacks, if your LDL is less than a 70, then why should any of us have an LDL over 70 if we can treat it? And if most men with a testosterone level under 500 can be having or suffering some symptoms of low testosterone, then why not get all men above that threshold into an optimal level, right?
Yeah.
But there wasn't a model out there. There was no practice or specialty that spoke about it. So I was just kind of chewing on all this.
It's really interesting to that you would be in a position where there was this back and forth, right? And it now makes me wonder how often people are in those positions and they can't actually resolve it in the way that they think. So they choose one side or the other, and that's the way they look at things, rather than, should I be thinking differently or making a decision based on what I'm seeing as outcomes on these two different things, because maybe there's some blend that makes more sense.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So I think when you were at UNC in med school for a second, you actually won an award for doing something around the aging population. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
So what was that? And what was the project that you worked on? Because I'm trying to, in my mind, kind of think, why do you have this mindset, and maybe something that triggered you a little bit earlier?
Yeah. So what we found out at UNC from some data points was that about 15% of clients in the community made up about 80% of the emergency department visits and fee structure. And the hospital was trying to figure out, hey, where's the disconnect where 15% of the population is making up 85% of the emergency room costs?
Okay.
And it was, what proposals do you have, or what can we come up with to address these individuals? And so we came up with this collaborative effort of, hey, we know these individuals, we know their name and where they live. They're coming to the ER every week with a problem. Instead of being a high dollar problem in the ER, can we make it a low dollar problem on the everyday? And so helped create a system where each of these folks that were kind of higher needs, or these repeat ER visits that were, again, a lot of financial cost to the hospital, of course, a lot of burden on the system, a lot of illness and fear for them, right? Because they're going to go to the ER, there's some fear associated with it. How do we help these clients do better? And so we came up with a program to basically have a dental student see them every week, a med student see them every week, a PT student see them every week, a pharmacist see them every week. And all of a sudden, they don't go to the hospital anymore in the emergency department because they got people looking at them, right? These were kind of very vulnerable population folks.
I see.
And all of a sudden you put, even a student that, like me, that didn't know too much, but you put them in front of them, it's like, oh, we could see the things happen. Like, oh, they got sent home from the hospital and no one's given their med for 3 days, or they're supposed to be a limited salt diet and all they have in the house is, Frito-Lay potato chips, right?
Right.
Or they were there for allergies and asthma and they have a house full of cats, or like their house hasn't been cleaned for months. And like, what can we do as students? And so we were empowered to basically come up with solutions like, okay, we'll hire a cleaning service and they would pay for these low impact costs because of a bunch of students. So it's like, oh, hire a student cleaning crew, or we'll have somebody come make sure their medicines are pulled for the week. And sure enough, the ER visits essentially dried up, right? So that perspective for me was like, hey, if we take good care of people, you change your outcome, right? When you love somebody and you have a servant's heart, you can change outcomes.
And that's the basis of a lot of the now current work around quality measures and sharing of patient outcomes, right? So like connecting the pharmacies together, making sure that you're connecting the different specialties and subspecialties together. Everybody's reporting on the same thing around certain measures for certain patients is supposed to help give that, it's supposed to enhance their outcome, right? As long as everybody's participating and in the end, someone is actually following up with the patient,
right? Communication.
Yeah. And so it's interesting to think about it in those terms, because then that would have been for you in the really late 90s, early 2000s.
Exactly right.
And so there wasn't the same level of interoperability between systems. And so trying to figure out how to coordinate that type of care on a wide scale would have been very difficult.
Oh, yeah, it just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Right? And I just had an experience with your organization we talked about before our interview today, but I saw your eye doctors at my doctor, and they had a seamless transition to have me see a specialist. And then right back, what was beautiful was everyone knew the data, and it was right there. They knew what y'all said to me and what Dr. Gupta said to me, and back and forth. I'm like, oh, I didn't have to communicate a single thing. And I was just thinking about how profound and lovely that is. I could communicate those things, but some folks, you tell them one thing and they go see another specialist, come back.
That's right.
And that's a really hard thing to translate what you might have heard or what the plan should be. And so, we almost take that for granted these days, right?
That's right.
That my providers will have some level of communication that doesn't let it rely on the patient, right? There's somebody else besides the patient being the advocate in those instances.
And so did you come out of the residency and go straight into your own practice, or did you stop along the way?
I did not stop along the way. Get back to I've always like let's go next stage. I'm not and I'm trying to become a stop and smell the roses person. I'm reading this great book and I'll share it with you. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Right, that's kind of, my wife got it for me as like not a gentle nudge. Right, she's amazing, and she's really trying to help me better myself in ways that I just almost refuse. But the ruthless elimination of hurry. But no, I went right into a family practice in Wake Forest, North Carolina.
Okay.
And it was probably, again, one of the bigger mistakes of my life. I knew I didn't mesh with the group good, but again, I came out of this thing where it's like, okay, I'm boarded in family medicine. This is what I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Even though at the hospital I worked, I did a lot of other things. I didn't have any way of setting up this practice that in my mind I wanted to do. I just didn't have the resources, financial or otherwise. So I had to make dollars for my family and my daughter. I had to have a career just to be able to take care of my family. That's first priority as always, right? God and family. And so I joined this practice where I just didn't fit because I'm trying to come up with different solutions, and it just doesn't work well in a practice where they're just providing very good family practice care. But I'm trying to think about how can we bring this model in, and that's just not how the medical model's set up, or you can't work as an outlier in the system. It's just not efficient. It's just not a good way to do it. And so I suffered it through that first year, and I realized my escape was I'm going to the emergency department. I had this beautiful experience in my residency where when I wasn't at the Mayo Clinic, I was at this hospital in Des Moines, big hospital, and we were the only residency there besides a surgical residence. And what that meant is all the services loved to have us on there. So they had eye doctors, and they had GI doctors and heart doctors and intern doctors, neurologists, and they all wanted people to help them do their work, right? Do their rounds, do their services for them, where they could let us, be their labor horses, crack the rocks, if you will. And so we pretty much, I don't say I had free reign of the hospital, but I had tons of cross-training, delivered over 300 babies, and did a ton of scopes and first assisted on a bunch of surgeries that is not a normal kind of practice experience.
Yeah.
In my ER training, we really got to run the ER. I mean, it was pretty amazing. A little bit of cowboy, to be fair, at the Wild West. We had people watching over us, but it was really nice because they let us kind of run the show. And so I was at this inflection point in my career, like, I am not happy doing this, but I have to provide for my family. And I thought, well, if I can bridge to the ER, I can make enough money, but then also have shift work to allow me to kind of come up with something.
Yeah.
Right. And so I spent a 15-year career in the ER seeing amazing, wonderful, crazy, wild things. I loved every minute of it, but I don't miss it for a second. Sort of idea of just crazy stories, amazing things, and just getting tons and tons of experience at like having wonderful, amazing, crazy things thrown at you, right, in the ER experience, gunshots and gang violence. And I had a woman literally shoot a baby at me. She shot a baby out at me and like hit me with the baby. Like just amazing stories of what you could, every great medical show over the 15 years, you get to see those things work in these like rural ER hospitals in North Carolina and Texas. So got a lot of experience, a lot of like, a lot of scars and tattoos of the world in that period of time while I started this practice on the side.
I find it interesting that you say that you don't really do marketing for the practice, but you've built this practice word of mouth. It's a thriving, busy practice, and so it speaks to you bringing something that people are in need of, really looking for. And the philosophy around it has to be something that speaks to a lot of folks. So talk a little bit about what it is that you do and some of the folks you've surrounded yourself with.
Right. I heard you say in one of the prior podcasts, sometimes to go forward, you have to go backwards.
Yeah.
Grew up in New Jersey, I have no amazing growing up stories, right? Very middle class neighborhood, a nice mixed neighborhood. I think the worst that ever happened was I was raised Catholic. We were in kind of a Jewish neighborhood, and we had to pay more for the bagels at the store because we were Christians. So we had like a different price for bagels than some of the Jewish kids. Like that's about the worst thing that ever happened to me. But I have a couple memories that like stick in my craw, right? I was an altar boy. I'm like, Dr. Joe's an altar boy for a Catholic church. It was an amazing experience. And my job was, I supported the priest. And I remember I got to hold the Bible while he read the sermon, or while he read the homily, I guess. In any event, so I would hold the Bible, and I stood there, and I really know better than a podium. I was probably worse than a podium because I was a small, shaky boy that moved and probably sweated on the Bible. But I remember just being in that moment, like there was something about serving. And I remember going home, and I'm like, when I hold my own book, it's not the same. But when I was holding a book for this priest, it was different. Like I was serving the whole congregation. This very way, I mean, again, a wooden podium was better at me than how I performed my job.
Yeah.
But to me, it was a big deal. And I thought as a child, I remember being 4th grade, 5th grade, I'm like, boy, something about serving others, like there's that purpose, right? So we're all looking for purpose. I think as human beings, we all want purpose. We all want connectivity. We just want to feel like we belong, right? We all know we're different. We all think, no one's like us, but we're all much more similar than we are dissimilar, right? But I remember that. And I remember I played soccer in a bunch of teams growing up. And I remember my mom would ask before the games, when she was like the team mom, where we used to cut up oranges, right?
Mm-hmm.
She said, hey, why don't you help cut up the oranges for the team? And I remember like having this joy when I'm cutting these oranges that I know, because man, the hot Jersey day in the summer playing soccer in a little crappy travel league where everybody's going to be a soccer star. But I remember like the highlight was after the game, you had orange slices and you talked about the game, right? But I remember cutting those oranges for my teammates. I was like, I felt good about that. But then I'm like, wait, when I cut an orange for myself, I didn't feel like I was just cutting an orange for me. And so like something was there that I was like, boy, I want to serve. And then I remember I used the word servant a couple of times. I'm like, people would look at you funny, like, servant, I think servant, you start to think these like negative connotations of like, having servants in your home or slavery, like this very negative term. But I think like serving others is our highest purpose we could ever have.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't articulate it all, but I felt like this very visceral response. And so here I'm in a busy ER and I'm thinking, I'm helping lives. I'm being compassionate as I can and trying to love others, right? And try and show as much of a Christian heart while caring for others. But it's hard in this very high press, fast paced environment. But I was doing my best. Yeah. But in the back, I'm like, I got this idea for medical practice where I think I can practice in a different way and also serve others. And so again, back to that point, I wanted to have a flock of like folks where I literally wanted to be a shepherd to take them to like a better pasture for health. And so that was like my idea. So I thought, well, I'm relegated to the ER because I have to make money for my family. And it was Wild West. It was on. I mean, it was on like Donkey Kong. And I like the wildness of it and the crazy shift work. But I kind of relegated myself to the fact that like, okay, that's how I have to provide for my family. But how I can provide for what my purpose is or what was speaking to me was maybe, something different. And I guess with you, I want to hear because with you, I know with your practice, I'm sure was something like you saw something bigger, right? Like a bigger opportunity.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking about how that works for any number of us, right? Because in my mind, when I was able to see patients every day, the piece that was great for me is the instant impact that you had on another individual, right? And I tell people all the time, like, oh, do you like what you do? Do you miss seeing patients? And while I love the opportunity that I have, right, I do miss the fact that people are grateful for the things that you do, and they really appreciate you being able to help solve whatever issue it is that they currently have. And so how I've thought about it on my go forward has been, if I were seeing patients in a single office as a single individual, I would be able to see on a good day, maybe I would touch 20 people, and those 20 people that I saw would go and touch 20 people of their own between their family and the people they would run into. And so I would have this sphere of influence. And in today's world, I get to multiply that touch by the number of people that our entire group of practices gets to see, because I have some influence over how those practices are operating and some of the things that we are going to touch a patient with every day. And so while I don't get to necessarily have that one-to-one interaction, I feel like I'm having that interaction 1,000-fold, because I'm able to now reach out and touch a doctor in an office, not just here, but maybe one in New York or one in Texas. And they get to tell me about their day, and they get to tell me about that patient they helped. And I get to think that was possible because of the things that we've done on this side to make that happen, right?
Yes.
And so I understand that that sentiment of being, there's something fulfilling about being able to help someone else get to something that they need to get, right? And it's a lot different than the feeling you get when you help yourself do it.
That's right. Well, you have this charisma, this way about you that you're like a quiet leader. That's I think about like who artist is. I'm like, he's just a guy. I just hear you and I hear you speak and your calmness. But again, when I go and I had that interaction with your staff, like Sharon there, she's just like, I felt like a little bit of you in her. It's like, if that's what you're going for, like it's totally happening, right? Just that gentleness and that like we care about you sort of thing, because that is something that you just don't find. I mean, customer service it's not about customer service. It's about like how do our customers serve us, right? That's what it's turned into across the road. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really not right. And I think places that have a servant's mentality are like, hey, people are coming to me as a choice, and like they're the honor that I should take with that. It's a lot on my shoulders, and I take that very seriously, as clearly you do. But I'm amazed at how many places don't, from doctors' offices to mini golf courses to restaurants and eateries, right? You can tell people to do it right.
You can tell. But you take it outside of your practice too, which is what it makes it, to our very first point, authentic, right? Because I think you and your wife have a farm, and the purpose of this. Well, you tell it, because you're gonna explain it better than I do.
No, I'm not, probably not. With a couple close friends who were kind of like-minded back in 2010, we bought a 67-acre farm in Lewisburg, this just rundown old farm up there that we basically kind of took over. And the idea was have a place for our kids to have some more touches with nature, more like the grow up that we had. We were just, when I was a kid, it was like, go out in the neighborhood and don't come home till dinner time sort of thing. And basically a chance to say, well, let's get out of that like suburban box a little bit and let the kids go, literally run the woods and swim in a pond that we dug and have an opportunity there. We knew early on that one of the goals of the farm was trying to give back a little bit. So one, in a green level, right, trying to have a place that we kept some green on the planet. We put some solar up there, right? So trying to feel good about like reducing our burden on the earth, which is, I'm sure I'm still consuming 50 times what I'm producing, right? But just trying to at least think about that.
Yeah.
But then we have a farmhouse up there where we have different families come through and stay. And they live there for free, and electricity is paid, and they're allowed to kind of use that as a transition time. They just have to kind of keep an eye on the property and maintain some kind of low-level duties, just kind of keeping the grass clipped in the main yard, just behaving. But just an opportunity for folks to, have a rent-free, utility-free time of their lives to maybe regather their resources and kind of come around. And we've had, I guess, 5 families come through now, sometimes with a little bit of hassle, sometimes with just nothing but amazingness, but come through. We're giving them a couple of years of kind of a break from the pressures of, different bad circumstances that might be under, a chance to kind of shake some of those pressing expenses and have a chance to kind of find themselves and focus again, start new careers, etc.
Yeah. And to me, when I found out about this, I was amazed, because I don't know how often people think about that part of life, right? When people are transitioning from one thing to the next, just having a little support or a little help makes a big difference in where they land going forward. And, I spoke with Kathy Higgins on a prior podcast, and one of the things that she talked about, and just kind of, you just feel it when she's talking about just genuinely helping people get better, right? And so it all ties together for me in that you talk about your experience in medical school, you talk about the experience in residency, and it starts to kind of come together when you then tie it with, man, I was the podium for the
sweaty, trembly podium.
I was slicing oranges for the team. I've got this farm, and now it just to me all makes sense around why the practice has grown and been the way that it is, because truly in the practice you are looking to help make people better.
I hope so. I've been blessed in so many ways. And I think, again, my purpose is to want to help others, like truly. And it sounds like, again, that servant's heart, it sounds almost in this day and age, it sounds like kind of passe or old school a little bit. And I'm okay with that. I don't do social media, not because I think there's anything wrong with it. I just see like it just leads to pressures and things that I don't want to have to deal with. So if I focus on basically helping others, it keeps my mind a little clearer. But yeah, it's been a great opportunity to kind of reinvent what my version of medical care kind of looks and feels like. And so I remember like another smash in the head or a weight bar in the head or an impact-induced concussion moment. But I was with this one doctor training, and he was like one of the best, right? And this is a Mayo Clinic guy, and he was amazing, good reviews, and people like would wait a long time to see him. And he was very compassionate, listened, but he's asking people those routine questions like, are you having headaches and vision changes and shorter breath and chest pain, right? Spending the time there. And he knew people and asked nice questions, said funny things. He had some good one-liners and all. Yeah. But then when we go back in the room, he had his game face and he has kind of like behind the room face, right? Which is always a sign of like, maybe this isn't the most fulfilling thing ever for this gentleman. But he just kept talking about like, man, my energy and my focus. And somebody's like, man, my mood is just a little off this time of year. And I'm like, that's what really matters to people. So I'm listening to this guy and I'm like trying to put together this medical model. I'm like, here I care about I want to be able to care about people, and I want to be able to address how do we get them to their best health. But then I also want to address issues that matter, right? And if people have headaches, they're smart enough to say, hey, I'm having headaches. Or like, if you're leaking poop on your stool today, you're going to tell me, are you leaking poop lately? They're going to tell you that. So it's like, let's start talking about energy. Let's talk about focus. Let's talk about mood. Let's talk about stress. Let's talk about sleep. Let's talk about sexual health. Let's talk about what you're putting in your mouth, nutrition. Let's talk about working out, right? Because those are the things that get us through the day, right? How can we expect somebody to, change their life around if they don't have enough energy to get out of bed in the morning, or if their focus is so off that they can't concentrate to get their work done?
Right.
And so if we don't get those, if we can't build that foundation of at least enough energy, focus, a good enough mood, enough sleep, and enough stress management, right, then how are people going to function? And I'm just blown away time and time again of how many successful folks come into my practice. And by successful, I mean in every measure. But financially and just people who are pillars of the community, running great organizations. But you talk to them, it's like, I am so exhausted all the time. I can't enjoy my family. I can't enjoy the fruits of my labor. I can't enjoy my free time. Or I'm so stressed that I can't sleep. It's like, what are we doing if we can't manage those things? And I think it's, with how tumultuous the times are, geopolitically and everything else, and how anti-community and kind of divisive everything has become, those things are getting worse, right? And I'm amazed that 40 to 60% of my, well-to-do, have-it-together clients are suffering horribly for energy or focus or mood or stress and hardly making it through the day. And these are the people that should be thriving and helping bring us all along, right? The leaders and the folks that are employing others and, trying to make the world a better place and volunteering and setting up, all the things we need for a great functioning society. And these folks are just hurting bad, right? Hurting really bad.
It's one of those things I think that there's stigma around trying to figure out if this is just the way it is or could it be different or better, right? And so I think when people measure success or look at successful people, I think there's always the question of, could it be any better, right? You don't necessarily see all of the things that person's having to do every day just to get to the point that they can go to work or help someone else. And so there is some stigma around those folks looking for help. And so having an environment where they can come and have the conversation, somebody really cares about them as a person, not them as what they do, because I think that's the other piece, right? In a lot of situations, successful people are surrounded by people who want to talk to them for what they do or what they can do for them, and not necessarily
Yes.
giving them the opportunity to get something because they need it. And I think in your environment, you allow for that.
Well, I think you said it really well, Artis. If you look at, I think at the end, like most of us, I don't say we're hanging there by a thread, but sometimes a couple of threads, but right, we're all just trying to make it through the day, right? I have good days and bad days just like everybody else. And, where I was like a little more energy or a little better mood or some better sleep some nights, of course. But I think supporting folks through, and I think normalizing that is a big deal, because everybody thinks, oh, here comes Artis, right? And he's got this huge car, he's flying around doing these amazing things. He has this podcast and, just kicking butt. But, Artis got some tough days, right? And some days just like, man, if I could just make it through today, that would be good.
That's
and so
exactly it.
if I can help Artis have a 10% better day, right? Or make that day that was just going to be okay, like, oh, you know what? Like, that was a good day, or a good day to a great day, right? Sometimes just turn that dial up 2 or 3 points on energy, focus, or mood, right? It can have all the impact in the world of how we feel about where we're at and producing, because we're all at that point, and is a little bit of age, yes. Is a lot of societal pressure, yes. Is it, pressures of, spouses, families, work. It's all there, and we all have it. And I think we don't give ourselves enough grace for, hey, we're just trying to make it through,
Yeah. So, Dr. Joe, if you were able to give listeners advice on any number of things, what would you pick, and what would you tell them if you only could tell them one thing?
One thing. See, my wife is laughing. He's like, there's no way he can say just one thing. I believe trying to identify your purpose and what makes your heart open or sing or whatever word you want to choose there. I think anything we do that gets us to that purpose is the best thing that we can do for ourselves. And how do we get there? That's the rough spot, right? We have to have enough energy, enough focus, enough mood, enough financial resources, right, along the way to get there. But again, I look at myself of my purpose is to help other people find or help them get to that purpose a little better.
I think that's sound advice. I think identifying your purpose is sometimes very difficult, and people work towards something that is not necessarily their purpose, and they work real hard and they make huge strides, but they don't feel like they are doing the right thing until they figure out what that purpose is. Once you get there, once you understand that, then your efforts become meaningful. And so I agree with you 100%. I think it starts with figuring it out first. And then once you figure it out, truly understand what it is that you're striving for, the rest of it starts to work for you.
That's beautifully said. Yeah, beautifully said.
I really do appreciate you coming and hanging out with me.
Yes.
And see, it wasn't so bad. You broke your rule, and it wasn't so bad.
I always tell my daughter, stick to your guns. Don't anybody talk you into doing something. And here I am in a very broken moment by very cool dudes.
I have been amazed at how many people have never considered sitting down to talk, but they have been gracious enough to come and join me, and I appreciate that from you. So thank you so much. And we talked about a lot of things, but there's a lot of things left to talk about, and so at some point we might have to do the Dr. Joe Part 2 story.
That's right. When your out of town guest gets stuck out of town, I can be like the guy that comes back on the Johnny Carson. I'm local. I can zip in and fill in a pinch.
That would be awesome.
And so we end another episode. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. I certainly appreciate all your support. So if you enjoyed the content, please like, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends. The more you share, the more opportunities we will have to bring you great guests and their remarkable stories. And if you want to know more about the guests, get background information on previous episodes, or just learn a bit more about me and the show, visit us at uncommonlyremarkable.com. Feel free to leave me a comment or a suggestion, and if you want to be featured on the show, click the Contact Us button. Until next time, stay remarkable.